Hello, friend. Welcome to another episode of the Mount Rushmore of Everything. Today, we are wrapping up our mini-series on different ancient gods, and we are wrapping up with Norse gods. I'll start with the clear non-negotiable that we're definitely going to agree on.
Come on.
The one that is also a hero that many of us have heard of.
Oh, really? You going with that one?
That's Thor.
All right, yeah. Okay. Yes.
But you didn't, was it not a non-negotiable for you?
Yeah, he is a non-negotiable. Okay. So, yeah, 1 for 1.
Yeah, so, I mean, God of Thunder, and, okay, before you have any issues, okay? Yeah, you.
Which you shouldn't. There's no reason.
But, if you're like, wait a second, you're just saying that because he's a famous Marvel character.
Yes.
No. No. Does that help? Yeah, it helped his iconicness, right? More people are going to know about him because of the fact that he also is a Marvel hero. But it is important to remove the bias of what I'm calling association bias, which is the idea of giving something extra points for something not related to the actual thing. Still with that, it's very hard to pick a god that's more iconic than Thor. I mean, like, even just taking the gods, ignoring the comic book, still, even in Norse culture, he was one of the most famous ones. He was the most powerful one in Norse culture. And then the iconicness, right? The hammer and the lightning and all that are just very, very iconic things that no matter how you look at it, he seems like a pretty clear choice, in my opinion.
Yeah. And for those that think, you're just doing that because of Marvel, because he's a superhero. But then also, why didn't they use another one of them?
Yes.
So,
like, there's a reason they chose Thor.
Yeah.
There's a reason for that. And it wasn't just like he's the coolest or whatever.
Which
he also probably, well, I don't know. There's some pretty sweet ones.
Yeah.
But once I saw them, I'm like, oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
Get Thor out of here. But I would go so far as to say he is the most famous and the most iconic, which are two of the criteria we're looking for. And I think he's number one on both of those lists. Also, I think we mentioned this in one of the Marvel videos, or we talked about it after, but if anything, I was concerned of the opposite thing. Because I think my experience is I didn't realize Thor was a Marvel comic, but I did know about the god before. And then when it came up, like Marvel Thor movie, I'm like, oh.
Really?
Really? Okay, so they just straight up stole a mythological god. What is your second non-negotiable then?
Odin.
Also one of my non-negotiables.
Okay, similar with Greek mythology and Zeus, and he's got a very similar backstory.
Yes, he's definitely the Zeus of this universe, for sure.
But they took some other weird ideas also that were very interesting.
Like when you see the list of what he represents.
Yeah.
Like, literally, it's a part of their mythology that he has, like, different sides that are not congruous with each other. Like, wisdom, healing, death, royalty, knowledge, battle, sorcery, poetry, frenzy, and the alphabet. So, frenzy and
the alphabet was just so interesting.
Why?
And he lost his eye to learn the wisdom of the alphabet.
Yes, which is also weird. It seems unwise to give up an eye for wisdom. But that aside, like, it is a fascinating, memorable backstory that helps make him iconic. And the eye patch thing is very iconic. Again, you can attribute some things to Marvel, but the reality is, like, there are a lot of gods in a lot of different cultures that have very little or nothing really iconic about them. Also, most revered of the gods, specifically back in Norse times. Which I think is also worth something, because iconicness now is more what we're going for, but it also should be importance to the time, as well as importance here, and relevance to the time as well as to here. So it's sort of a balancing act of sorts, but clearly on there. So I have one more non-negotiable. Of any where I feel their iconicness to mythology is not as iconic as their iconicness to the comic book, it is this one. But I still have to go with Loki because of how iconic he's become, and he's so well known as the trickster god. And I would even go so far as he is the most iconic in his role of any mythological god. When it comes to the specific role of the antagonist god, what you have to compare to is Set, who I think is fairly iconic with Egyptian. And then Ares maybe for Greek, kind of Hades, but not really. Hades isn't really, like, he's the god of the underworld, but not necessarily actually an antagonist. he's an antagonist in the movie, but like he's not like an actual mythology. He wasn't the antagonist god.
Right.
That role was a little bit more Ares, but sort of vague. Mars or Saturn and Roman, but Loki is like the antagonist god of antagonist gods. While this is not measured against gods from other mythologies per se, I do think once you see how notable it is that like this is the premiere of the antagonist gods. This is the most famous of antagonist gods across all mythology. Easily, in my opinion, top 2 or 3 for famous and iconic. The scepter and the whatever
the
that you think is maybe from the comics. No, it's not. That's actually that's actually from the mythology. That again is very iconic, so it's an iconic look.
Yeah.
And he's very famous. How much of that do we attribute to Marvel is a little hazy to tell now.
So again, why do they use that as opposed to any of the others?
Exactly. Definitely pop culture is like a place to look to see.
Yeah, they can point you to
and
what is.
Correlation and causation can be a little vague, right? We know what came first, but what came first is not necessarily the indicator of which was more important. But I do think that is definitely in the line of evidence that like Loki's been brought up by more things than just Thor comics, and there was probably a reason for that.
So I'm gonna go with Heimdall. He is gonna be my 4th one then.
Which I think is a very valid choice and one of the like 4 that I was like,
yeah.
But you know what? I'm excited that we're finally going to have a disagreement because it feels like it's been weeks in a row that we've just been like, here are the 4, we agree.
He had an important role as the doorkeeper or the gatekeeper between their world and our world. This guy had a very specific and important role into keeping the rainbow bridge open or closed. But then he was in 4 movies, the Marvel movies.
Now that's as a comic, but yes. Again, it's a little, where do we give the credit? It's almost like a tiebreaker at this point. It's sort of like my favorite.
That's what makes it hard because, you're talking about the Mount Rushmore, and if you ask, people in Scandinavia, and they're probably going to have a very clear idea of which ones, or a closer idea and probably more objective idea.
I don't know if it's more objective. It's just a different perspective. They would be less objective, right? Yeah.
And they might have a different point of view because they are probably more familiar than what I can be.
Which is not necessarily an advantage. It can be a disadvantage because the iconic is important. Which is why I would say get in the niche and then back off. So I was looking up like top 10 lists by like all these historical sites and stuff like that. And they seem to be pretty hesitant to rank, but this was one that repeatedly came up in the top. One of the most recognizable names that was remaining. And then it also seemed to maybe be the top female goddess for iconicness over time. Okay. And it is one of the common tropes that shows up. Again, sometimes it makes the Mount Rushmore, sometimes not. But it's the goddess of love, sex, beauty, etc., which is Freya.
Freya.
Yes.
Freya.
I struggled for a long time.
Okay.
And I don't know that I love it. But for now, I am standing by it. Although, when it comes to the season finale live, this might be one of those that I revisit and have a firmer idea and change.
Okay.
If you haven't already, be sure to subscribe, click the little like button and the notification bell so you know when new videos come out, because we have a new video out every Thursday for the Mount Rushmore of everything. And we will see you next time.
With Odin, he is Anthony Hopkins.
Pretty good person to picture. He has quite the
he did a good job.
record.
He did a really good job as a big daddy of the Norse Gods.
Maybe not quite as iconic as some of his other roles. Yeah. Like flesh-eating ones.
Yeah.